December 1946, just a year after World War II had ended, the United States launched one of its most ambitious expeditions ever attempted, Operation High Jump. Officially, it was a scientific research mission. Unofficially, it was far more strategic. The US military had turned its attention to Antarctica, vast, frozen, and unclaimed continent. The post-war world was shifting rapidly, and military planners believed that future conflicts might not just be fought over land and ideology, but over territory that had never before been contested. Antarctica, with its enormous size and complete lack of national ownership, suddenly became a point of interest for superpowers. The US dispatched a massive naval fleet, 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and more than 5,000 men to establish a presence, scout the terrain, and quietly prepared the groundwork for potential American control. One of the first planes to fly inland was a large Navy seaplane called the George I. Aboard were 9 men, each selected for their role in what was still a classified mission. Among them were 2 experienced pilots, several machinists, a radio man, a navigator, a photographer, and the captain overseeing the flight. As they took off from the floating airbase USS Pine Island, the weather was already deteriorating. The air was so cold that the engines strained to lift the heavy aircraft more than 300 meters above the ice. Despite the freezing conditions, they pressed on, determined to reach the Antarctic coast and begin their survey work. But as they flew deeper into the continent, the storm grew more intense. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the horizon disappeared into a wall of white. Ice covered everything, including the altimeter, which now struggled to give an accurate reading. Unbeknownst to the crew, the ice beneath them had been rising steadily. Their instruments showed they were still safely hundreds of meters in the air, but the ground was creeping up fast, mountains and ridges hidden beneath layers of snow. The lead pilot, known to his crew as Frenchie, decided it was too dangerous to continue and made the call to turn back. But just moments before they could change course, the unthinkable happened. The George I slammed into the side of a mountain. A massive explosion tore through the aircraft as 5,000 liters of aviation fuel ignited instantly. The impact shredded the seaplane's hull, scattering debris and men across the icy landscape. The crash was catastrophic. 2 crew members, Henderson and Lopez, were killed immediately, having been thrown through the aircraft's propellers. The rest of the crew were badly injured, their bodies broken and burned, yet still alive in the middle of a white desert. Frenchie, the pilot, suffered severe burns and could barely move. Fred Williams, another crew member, had a broken back, severe facial injuries, and was barely clinging to life. The rest were dazed, cold, and beginning to feel the early symptoms of hypothermia, but instinct took over. In the midst of the chaos, the survivors salvaged what they could from the wreckage and dragged it together to form a makeshift shelter. They found a parachute and rigged it across the tunnel section of the plane to block the snow and wind. Sleeping bags, tent parts, and a few crates of canned meat and soup were gathered. They had no idea if anyone would come for them, or if they would ever be found in this vast, lifeless terrain. Williams was in such bad shape that he couldn't be moved, so the others built a crude shelter around him, using aircraft debris, and insulated the space with fabric and whatever soft material they could find. But hours later, when one of the crew, Robbins, went to check on him, Williams had already slipped into unconsciousness and died, claimed by the cold. Now, only 6 of the original 9 remained, stranded in a frozen wasteland, surrounded by snow and silence. They had no way of contacting their base. Their only hope was that someone would notice they were missing and launch a search. Back on the USS Pine Island, concern was growing. The George I had failed to check in. Its last known coordinates placed it somewhere inland, but with no way of knowing exactly where it had gone down. Organizing a rescue was incredibly difficult. To make matters worse, a massive storm had rolled in over the coast, grounding any potential rescue flights for the next 3 days. The men on the ground, meanwhile, were running out of fresh food and water. Frenchie was deteriorating rapidly, his burns becoming more severe, and he was unable to eat or drink. Yet, despite the pain, he remained stoic and even cracked jokes to keep the others going. On day 4, the skies finally cleared. The sun emerged, casting long shadows over the twisted wreckage and the snow-covered graves of their fallen comrades. The survivors took the time to properly bury their dead, using metal parts from the plane to mark the sites in the hopes that future rescue teams might locate them. Robbins, still searching the wreck for supplies, found a gas stove, and managed to get it working by siphoning fuel from one of the plane's tanks. That small victory lifted spirits. He became the crew's makeshift cook, preparing what little food they had, usually a bowl of hot spinach soup, followed by peanut butter on stale bread. Robbins also found a camera that had belonged to Lopez, the photographer who died in the crash. He took a few photos of the site, tucking the film safely in his sleeping bag. They were determined to document their survival, in case they didn't make it. On day 5, their rations began to run dangerously low. They had no fresh meat left, and only dry canned goods remained. Morale was sinking fast, but the very next day brought a sliver of hope. A rescue plane from Pine Island had finally taken off and begun searching in a grid pattern near the George 1's last known location. As it flew overhead, Frenchie stirred. Despite being half-conscious and delirious, he told the others he could hear a plane. It turned out he was right. The rescue craft had passed within just 20 kilometers of their position. But thanks to fog and the white, featureless landscape, the crew was never seen. Several more days passed, each one more grueling than the last. The survivors decided to pile up some debris to create a signal fire. They found a small can of yellow paint and used it to scrawl a message on the wing. They were doing everything they could to be found. And then, finally, on the 13th day, their luck changed. The skies cleared, and a search plane spotted movement near the crash site. The crew on the ground saw the plane circle back, and for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, they knew help was on the way. But there was a problem. The rescue aircraft had no landing gear that could handle rough terrain. Their only chance was to reach a frozen lake 10 miles north flat, enough for a safe water landing. The search crew dropped a message. If they could make it to the lake, they should form a circle. If not, form a straight line. The men immediately formed a circle and strapped Frenchie onto a makeshift sled. Then they began their final journey, 10 miles through chest-deep snow, dragging an injured man with nearly no food or energy left. It took 12 agonizing hours to reach the lake. Along the way, the rescue plane dropped small caches of food and supplies to guide them. Just as they reached the edge, a thick fog rolled in, reducing visibility to zero. They were close but couldn't see the plane or the rescuers. And then, right before them, a cliff, 20 meters high. It was the final obstacle. But to their amazement, just to the left, a narrow snow path led safely down, almost as if it had been carved out for them. At the bottom, two rescue men emerged from the mist. Tears flowed as the survivors were helped onto the aircraft, cold, injured, and exhausted, but alive. All 6 men made it safely back to the USS Pine Island, where they were treated and debriefed. They had survived 13 days in the most hostile environment on Earth, with no contact, no guidance, and no certainty of rescue. As for the 3 men who perished, their bodies remained buried under over 100 meters of snow and ice, preserved forever in Antarctica's silent, frozen tomb. The camera that Robbins had found, the one containing photos of their ordeal, was sadly never recovered. It remains lost with the wreckage of the George 1's undeveloped film, still waiting, somewhere beneath the ice, to tell the story from the crew's own perspective. No one has returned to the crash site in nearly 80 years, but those 13 days, and the bravery of the men who endured them, remain one of the most extraordinary survival stories in US military history.